We're here.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome Wednesday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
And before we even get started, Ricardo, Joe apparently is under the weather and we got a call from his assistant. And so we had to punt today and we are going to be speaking with Kevin Gazzola, right?
Kevin Gazzola will be coming on to talk about the
Assange.
Julian Assange case.
So I'm sorry that didn't work out. We will get Joe on, but yeah.
Probably a week from now.
Things happen.
They do.
So that's that. So
you never want it to happen at the last minute, but you know what? When you're sick, you're sick.
No, and there's recent happenings with the Assange case, so that's always good. Yes. And we have a lot of good news today.
Well, you can thank me because I did it all last minute. I was like, okay, got it.
And it's good that there's certain people. Oh, by the way, I already asked you to see if you can get Aaron to come on.
Yes.
I really want to talk about what's going on in the Ukraine.
We need to have a real expert. Even Rania would probably be really good.
I was thinking about asking her, but I had asked Katie, I'm like, who do you think I should reach out to? But I really want to talk about what's going on in the Ukraine, but I need to do so with someone who's really knowledgeable on what's going on in the Ukraine and somebody who just doesn't know. I need a real journalist. So we're working to find the right person to come on that can really speak to this very,
Ricardo,
accurately.
You're awesome. Spread the word. It looks like we've got some connection issues this evening, so bear with us.
Well, yeah, the weather here has been horrendous.
Been really
horrendous.
Crappy.
It's been storming. So we are.
But I made it.
I'd love to have Ralph Nader. Have you ever reached out?
Hard to connect with him, but we're still trying. We really want to get Jesse Ventura.
I'm a fan. I'd love to get Jesse Ventura. I mean, look, there's definitely people that we really want to get.
Yes.
There are, and I think Peter does an amazing job of getting people. And what's great about it is I don't always know who the people are, and then once I look them up, then I'm like, oh, I have to listen to that book, and so I get all sorts of. I'm generally I listen to the books.
So obviously, this has been a huge day today. We all know, of course, dear friend of ours, Nina Turner, is running for Congress again, which makes things very interesting regarding a potential progressive presidential challenger in 2024. Because as I have said before, I always thought that Nina's path, if she was going to be Bernie's heir apparent, was going to be through Congress for a handful of terms, and then come 2028, that would be her opportunity to ultimately run. So 2024, we've talked about, as of right now, Joe Sanberg is somebody who has been floated. We will eventually have him on. And then, of course, there is Marianne Williamson. So we will see what ultimately ends up happening. But we are obviously very thrilled that Nina is running again. Yeah. We are definitely going to Cleveland and Akron.
I was thinking about maybe going there from Chicago, but I'll see.
Yeah, why not?
I necessarily can't. I have to figure out what I'm doing.
Jen has a potential trip to Chicago.
No, I'm going.
She is going.
I'm going. March 4th. I am going to be the speaker. It was the first time I've ever been invited to speak anywhere where they're paying me. It's fascinating.
Jen,
I feel like normally
kind of a big deal now,
it's a
Jen.
big deal. It's an honorarium. So the Northwestern University College Democrats asked me to be their speaker this quarter. And yes, they reached out to me because I am a Northwestern alum. And so I'm sure, that's something. But they actually offered to pay for my travel expenses and give me an honorarium. And I was fascinated. First, I thought it was a troll. I'm like, that can't be real. We normally beg people to allow us to speak.
Listen. Almost every and listen, Northwestern is the Harvard of the Midwest. So as far as I'm concerned, you want to talk about corruption at the highest level of private institutions in this country? Yes, extremely. But the students and the clubs that are there, that's not the controversy. The controversy is the fact that you have schools that charge what they charge, and they have for, let's say, 4,000 or 5,000 student body. 15 vice presidents.
Here's the thing, though, about it is that, so I didn't go to Northwestern for undergrad, which is where most people, I think, develop their first, that's their loyalty to undergrad. I went there for a graduate program in integrated marketing communications, which is at the Medill School of Journalism. And it was an amazing experience. The faculty there was amazing. Our business courses were taught by Kellogg School of Business professors. I mean, there is a certain quality there, and I don't know any of it. I'm sure there's nonsense. I'm sure there's nonsense, but I had a good experience there.
It's not just aristocrats that go to these schools.
No, and that's the thing. I was there on loans that I was able to pay off.
Now, do a lot of aristocrats go to Northwestern and Wash U and University of Michigan?
Now he's rejected from Washington University. Do
they stink anyway, so who cares?
they? I don't even know. I just don't have his
actually, cousin of mine actually went to WashU St. Louis.
Do you want to do our Help Wanted first, or what do you want to do?
Well, you know what? Mr. Dixon, I believe, is going to be ready in a few minutes.
So let's do this. So guys,
so of course, an unfortunate side note. Yes, Nancy Pelosi's running again, but you got to do.
Can we gloss over that? Let's just assume anybody in our
I'm sure
line
she's
of
going to have a
thinking
challenger, as is
not
the
thrilled.
gentleman who will be coming on to talk about another person who's being challenged, who frankly hasn't been challenged.
I
yet
wish
and
I could talk about him.
needed to
I
be.
wish I could really
We'll
talk
have a lot
about
to talk
him the
about
way
that.
I want to talk about him, but I can't. We really would need like Tim Black to do it for me.
But huge news today. Justice Breyer is going to retire this summer. And so because he's going to retire, that means that President Biden is going to have a SCOTUS pick that he is going to be able to make. Now, is he actually going to make it and is going to allow Mitch McConnell to kick the can down the road?
Who knows?
Who knows?
However, I decided that I would help Joe. And so I went ahead and took the liberty of crafting a Help Wanted ad for the SCOTUS position, which really to me looks, so if you would like to read that, because
we're hiring. Are you Black? Are you a woman? If so, SCOTUS is looking for a justice just like you. Submit your photo and a lock of your hair. Did you really have to say that?
I did.
To Joe Biden, Oval Office, White House, resume not necessary. SCOTUS is an equal opportunity employer.
I couldn't help myself. As soon as I saw that Joe Biden, I will appoint a Black woman to the Supreme Court. It's like,
but what if that woman has been lobbying on behalf of Lockheed Martin for the past 15 years?
Or the fossil fuel industry or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I know this will be translated into Jen doesn't think there's qualified Black women to be on the Supreme Court.
God help
us
us all.
I totally don't think that. But the fact that he's going to find a Black woman for that spot, I find it offensive for so many reasons. I find it offensive. And I just, it's so wrong. It's so wrong. So, we have been.
We need a member of SCOTUS who is not bought and paid for by corporate power. That's what we need.
We need good jurists. And yes, I am sure there are a myriad of very qualified Black female jurists, but that shouldn't be the point of what he's saying he's going to do. There shouldn't be a threshold.
And if you want it to be, and if that's what you want it to be, then say, I would like it to be a Black woman who is going to represent the people, not represent corporate power.
But this shouldn't even be
that caveat's never even concluded. And now we're in a situation where we know how this thing's going to unfold. It's going to be, well, we have to make sure that all sides are happy with the pick, and this person's got to do this and has got to do that. But they're already floating Obama as the Supreme Court pick.
I can't even.
It's like
I can't even.
The people who do this are no better than the people who get on their knees for Trump. It's the same thing. Just again, there's this hero worship that is so dangerous in politics that we desperately want to get away from.
I would like to point out I am wearing my dissent collar earrings in the weird. I knew we'd be talking about
Supreme Court. RBG.
They're RBG's dissent collar in silver. My mom bought them for me. And so I thought that would be like a good thing.
We do not need Nina Turner for SCOTUS. We need her for Congress. That's what we need. And you know who else we need?
Nina Turner's not an attorney. She's not a jurist. She doesn't want to be in the judiciary. She's a fighter. She's a street fighter.
Everybody who is out there talking about what we need, how about what we need is better leadership in the Democratic Party?
Oh.
One of the most controversial moments that we sat through, particularly during the 2020 primary before all hell broke loose with COVID, was what happened in South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
We all know that Bernie Sanders made a number of mistakes. He did. But what he didn't make a mistake with was how he responded to so much of the controversy, particularly what happened with Pete Buttigieg in Iowa. Bernie still technically won that state, won New Hampshire, blew out in Nevada. And then here we go, circling the wagons, if you will, in terms of what's going to happen in South Carolina. And Jim Clyburn, who is basically a god, as I've been told, in the South, decided to put his thumb on the scale for Joe Biden instead of Bernie Sanders. He could have decided not to even get involved, which probably would have been enough for Bernie to win. But no, he decided, I am going to support the person who has supported countless legislation that has harmed communities of color for multiple generations.
I'm going to go with that guy.
So,
I really wish I could talk about.
We are now going to speak with somebody who is running for Congress against Jim Clyburn. Now, as far as I know, Mr. Clyburn has not had a primary challenger before. I could be wrong.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
But he is going to have one now. And we're going to wait a second for Mr.
There
Dixon.
We go. Here he is.
And so, without further ado, this is somebody that Jen has really been looking forward to speaking with.
Yeah.
We are going to get a very interesting lesson about what life is like in the Deep South, in South Carolina.
Oh, I'm getting a lesson on Gullah because I want to talk about that because I find that stuff fascinating.
And he's got a wonderful hat to basically engage us in the culture, which is great. Marcel Dixon, welcome to Generational Change.
Hello, everyone.
How are you?
Good evening.
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
We're good. I love that, y'all. So talk a little bit about what was the inspiration for. Maybe we lose video because of our connection. Is that possible?
No, it's definitely my end. Sorry about that. It's definitely
no, because we're having a storm right now. I could see that our internet's not great.
Okay. You know, the great thing, and we're speaking with Marcel Dixon, who is running for Congress in South Carolina's 6th congressional district against none other than Jim Clyburn. The good news is that podcast is also on Spotify and Apple. So if our video does not come in well, you'll also be able to hear it in audio version as well. So keep that in mind. But yes, as far as we know, Marcel, Representative Clyburn, for the generation plus that he has been a representative in South Carolina, has never been primaried before. Is that correct? This is going to be the first time he's being primaried?
He has been primaried before, but it hasn't been in 20 years. So I'm sure he's forgotten what it's like. So it's like it's like a person who hasn't ridden a bicycle in a while. You have to put the training wheels back on. So it's been 20 years. The last time he was primaried, I was graduating from high school.
So let's talk about
2002.
Let's talk about his legacy because, you know, I believe, and I believe I saw this on your website, that we're talking South Carolina is at the bottom of all of these different lists and rankings in so many important infrastructure areas. And so how can somebody claim to be doing a good job when you're consistently at the bottom? So you talk about some of those areas where you know he has been just clearly deficient.
Well, one, he's been our congressman for 30 years. He was elected in 1992 and then took his position in 1993. Okay, now we're here in 2022. And our district, South Carolina District 6, which is majority Black and majority Black American, is the 6th poorest district in the entire United States of America. There are 435 districts in the United States of America, and after 30 years, the best he has been able to do for us is have us at the 6th poorest. That's overall. There's another statistic that is even more heartbreaking for children, and the majority of children look like me, and they look like Mr. Clyburn. It is the 3rd poorest place for a child to be raised in the United States of America. And this is after 30 years of being in power. Another statistic is that in several towns here in South Carolina, Denmark, South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina, the people struggle to get something as basic as clean drinking water. It was discovered back in 2020 that Denmark, South Carolina, for 10 years, they were being subjected to having an unapproved chemical contaminant placed in their water. For 10 years, Mr. Clyburn has not taken an aggressive stance to do anything about that. It was Bernie Sanders, of all people, who brought hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases of water to Denmark, South Carolina, and made it a public issue. A white man, a white senator from Vermont, had to come down to the deep South in very black South Carolina to make it a national issue, not our own congressman. Another thing is that the district that James Clyburn is in is the poorest district in South Carolina. Not only is it the poorest district, it also has the least access to health insurance and to health care facilities. And these are just some of the statistics that we have after him being in power for 30 years. And while his portfolio has grown into the millions, the average income of a person in his district is just $41,000, whereas the average income for the United States of America is $63,000. But for Black Americans, and this is very important, for white American, it's $56,000. For a Black American, $28,000. So we are to the bottom in a district where we are the majority in an area that, like all of this country, was built by our labor and by our intellect, and with having a Black man who's a South Carolinian in charge for the past 30 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like that. It's no, it's believable because we're not in that different of a situation here. It's just our district isn't as vulnerable and isn't as poor and isn't as needy. And it's just pathetic to me that this man has been sitting with a federal seat under him for 30 years and he hasn't raised attention for any of these things. This pathetic.
We're speaking with Marcel Dixon. He is running for Congress in South Carolina's 6th district, currently occupied by Senate House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn.
I didn't know I could dislike him more. Actually, I really did not think like I could dislike somebody more.
No, I
actually really do.
It's not hard to dislike him because, unfortunately, Mr. Clyburn, my understanding, Marcel, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe has taken more money from the private insurance industry, private health insurance industry, than any other congressional representative in either party. He is number one, and to be
and they can't get healthcare.
We call there's this there's a way of looking at it, but basically, being the gatekeeper to the establishment, he is in many ways the ultimate gatekeeper. So if you can take us on a journey back to the 2020 presidential primary when Mr. Clyburn decided to endorse Joe Biden, what was sort of the feeling, if you will, because it seems that there really is a generational, or in this case, maybe even multi-generational divide in the Black community in terms of where the citizenry wants this country to go in terms of policy, in terms of overall direction. It seems that the older generations are really stuck in the past with their representatives that have been there forever. How would you describe what that whole experience was like, and how where we stand today?
The older Black community is definitely still in a large way like very Team Clinton oriented. All right, sorry.
I would have to disagree with that. That is not to acknowledge that there is definitely a discrepancy. It's not that the older Black American population, especially here in South Carolina, is quote unquote stuck in the past. It's that they're still stuck trying to face and solve the issues of the past. We have less homes now, Black Americans. We own less homes now than we did during the 1960s when it was legal to discriminate against Black Americans. And who brought that to the national spotlight? Was it Mr. Clyburn? No, it was Elizabeth Warren, a white senator from Massachusetts, again, who went on a tour through the Deep South, Mississippi, in the Delta, one of the poorest, if not the poorest, the poorest region of the United States of America, outside of Appalachia. And she highlighted that Black Americans now are less likely to own a home and own less homes now than we did during the 1960s. Black men have the shortest lifespan of all demographics. And unfortunately, we've lost a few years since the COVID-19 pandemic. Our schools are still as segregated as they were before Brown versus Board of Education. And don't get me wrong, if a school's majority black, that's not a negative to me at all. Absolutely not. It's not the fact that they're segregated that's the problem. It's the fact that usually the blacker area, the poorer an area is going to be. And being that schools are financed by property taxes, and property taxes are largely based on the value of how property is assessed, and black people's property is far, far, far more likely to be assessed at being worth less, much less. The schools in those areas get far less resources. So the kids who are descendants of the people, as I, who have been denied education the most, are now being denied the resources to get the highest quality education. We are still facing the fact that a black woman is 3 to 5 times more likely to die giving birth to a child than a white woman, and that black patients are far less likely to be prescribed painkillers, but are far, far more likely to have amputation of their limbs, are far less likely to be diagnosed correctly and given practices that can truly heal the sickness that they are experiencing. These are issues, and there are many, many, many more, that my great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, because my great-great-grandparents were alive when I was a child. They died in the 90s. My great-grandparents were all alive until I was in my late 20s and my early 30s. And I still have a great-grandfather who's alive right now, who, by the way, lives in poverty because he was excluded from the GI Bill, which was a bill to give home grants, pretty much, business grants, free college education, health care, retirement to white veterans that have fought in World War II. Black veterans, by default, were excluded from it, and he was one of them. So when my father was born, his grandson, he didn't have a penny, which my father could inherit. My father inherited poverty because that's what his father had inherited, and that's what my great-grandfather had inherited. And black Americans, older black Americans, are still in the mindset of having to fight those issues. That being said, they've seen some level of progress. They've seen the falling of Jim Crow, at least legislatively speaking. Okay? They've seen black Americans shown amazing growth, educationally speaking, in regards to educational attainment. What they may not be aware of, however, is that educational attainment has not resulted in a drastic increase of our wealth. Matter of fact, at the end of slavery, and this is a very glaring statistic, black Americans only own 0.5% of America's wealth. Today, we barely own 3%. For slavery to have been over for centuries now, the fact that we've only increased 1 or 2 percentage points says a lot about how much more there is left to be done. But when I talk to older black Americans and they've seen things go from racial massacres to where something like that is far, far less likely to happen, unless, I will say, covertly, they don't want to lose the progress they've seen. So they are voting out of fear that if I don't support this Democrat, as bad as awful as he is, because trust me, Clyburn is not as popular as you would think he is, not according to people whom I've spoken with, and I don't even mention the man's name when I talk to them. And definitely not this current president we have. Definitely not. Yet people voted for them out of fear that if they went with another option, that other option may not win. And this particular person was far more likely to win. So I don't think they are so enamored with Bill Clinton, because I think because we are now in the age of social media where there's rapid communication and there's information at people's fingertips, the veil of Clinton being good for the black community, that myth has been slaughtered. Even with Obama, people are starting to realize that he failed to deliver for the black American community. But it's fair that we need to go with a safe choice and not the more radical choice. And from what I've read, that same fear existed during the civil rights movement, where, contrary to what people will think, it wasn't every black American the people who are now my elders, then who were supporting Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Septima Poinsetta Clark, who's Gullah Geechee as am I. It was the more radical ones who were more demanding that things were not going to stay the same, whether they die or whether they get it. So that is what we're seeing. People voting out of fear and feeling that they have to be very strategic with their vote and not vote for a candidate who's going to fight for the things that need to be fought for and risk losing, but for the candidate who they feel is safe and things may not get better, but at least it won't get any worse. So
yeah, I think we have like really, we're just used to being abused in this country in so many ways. Our standards are very low. But so what are your like the key issues? I mean, there's so many. I know that there's just so many. And for us, it's really about just overall justice, economic justice, environmental justice, like, and not any one policy in particular. But like, what are the key things that you think from a legislative standpoint, I mean, that you would want to do that you think are the most important priorities?
Well, before I get to that, I want to just talk about the younger Black American generation is getting, and I want to just touch that point and I'll get to that question. With the younger Black American generation, I am seeing a lot of impatience and a demand that we are no longer going to just vote out of some misplaced loyalty to the modern day Democratic Party. A lot of Black Americans my age, a little older, and definitely younger are saying, wait a minute, my great-grandparents voted for you because of the civil rights legislation, which you did not do specifically for us. You pretty much did civil rights legislations for everyone, but it wasn't everyone out there marching. It wasn't everyone out there getting beaten. It wasn't everyone out there getting lynched, homes being bombed, churches being bombed, children being killed, people massacres, and having the legacy of chattel slavery. That happened to Black Americans, freedmen, as I refer to us, because Black Americans who are the descendants of those who were emancipated, according to the Congressional Freedmen's Bureau Act 1 and Freedmen's Bureau Act 2, were called freedmen. So I would use that terminology. That was happening to freedmen. And yet, the civil rights legislation was open to other groups that were even hostile towards us. What people don't like to talk about is that we talk about Hispanics or Latinos, which can be of any race. What is not talked about is how a lot of different Hispanic ethnic groups, at the same time the civil rights movement was happening, just some years before, a lot of them were suing to be considered white, even if they were as Black as I. We don't talk about how there were Asian groups at that time who were begging their leaders not to get involved and support the civil rights movement. But now those very same groups benefit from our legislation. White women, who were 40% of enslavers, are now considered an oppressed group, a minority, and are the main beneficiaries of affirmative action, something that was supposed to open the door to opportunities that have been denied to people like me, who weren't allowed to go to universities that we built and in industries that we helped to innovate or push forward. So my generation is a lot more impatient. We've said since the 1960s to now, we've lost 14 million acres of property. 14 million acres of land Black America has lost. We have barely owned as a group 1 million acre of property. And the Democrats have done not one piece of legislation to help remedy that. So we're saying you're going to have to earn our vote. And the Democrats better wake up, because I tell you who's waking up. The Republicans are waking up, because I speak to a lot of Republicans, and a lot of them are noticing how discontented Black Americans are becoming with the Democrats and have been. You even have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who made a post when when news came about that the Biden administration was trying to give $450,000 per immigrant who was separated from their child. And even she made a tweet saying, I thought reparations was supposed to be for Black Americans who are the descendants of slaves. So the Republicans are noticing. And if any Democrat thinks that they aren't going to use that to leverage their numbers, we better wake up. Now, as far as my platform goes, my main platform is reparations. And just to explain, reparations is something that when a nation or government does a group of people wrong, they have to repair the damage they've done to that group via compensation. America, people may not believe it or not, has a long history of paying reparations. They've done it to several Native American groups, whether it was the Alaskan Natives, whether it was the Five Nations, which includes the Cherokee, by having settlements with them where they got reservations. We know that history is not a perfect one, but it happened. Whether they got actual money. They did it with the Japanese, who were illegally interned during World War II. And that just happened in the 1980s. I was literally alive when that happened, the reparations part, not the internment. We even pay reparations to Jews as who are descendants of those from the Holocaust, even though we didn't have anything to do with that. And the thing that really embitters me, though, Black Americans who went through 260 years of brutal enslavement. We say slavery and we think of people just working in a field picking cotton. No, it was brutal. It was harsh. It was torture. From us being forced to have orgies with people that were enslaved, to our children being torn away from us, to our bodies being mutilated, whether it was our nose, our fingers, to us having to work in horrific environments like here in the South Carolina Low Country, in the swamps filled with malaria and snakes and gators, whether it was just the fact that we will be burnt alive, we will be beheaded just to keep a control of a population via fear. But even after slavery, while white America was getting land from the Homestead Act of 1781 and the Homestead Act of the early 1800s, which to this day, over 60 million white families can trace their wealth to the American federal government giving them land, Black Americans were freed, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, to famine and to torture. We were so impoverished that there are still stories people tell down here in South Carolina, because this is the home of the Confederacy, where people tell the stories of having to eat rotten food from the bodies of dead soldiers. But then there was the burning when we did build successful communities out of nothing, being illiterate, being penniless, us being such amazing people. We built Black Wall Streets, not just the one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, not just the one in Durham. We have Black Wall Streets in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, all throughout this nation. What happened to them? Over 50 of them were burnt to the ground. The Republicans abandoned us in the 1870s. The Democrats have abandoned us in modern time. Redlining, Jim Crow, the FHA putting railroad tracks and highways through our neighborhoods. They destroyed my community that way in the early 2000s. They widened the highway and broke up my family. None of that. My great-great-grandparents are gone. My great-grandparents are gone. And when I see them being lowered into that ground now, it hurts extra because I realize they didn't get a penny for all the horror they had to live through. So my policy is reparations. Reparations is something this country has done before, but it hasn't done it for the people to which it has done the most wrong to. Now, before I explain it, reparations is not punishment for the wrong this country has done to us. That punishment is going to get them. I feel you reap what you sow, you're going to get yours in due time. Reparations is compensation and is not a payment from white people to Black people, okay? Even though it was white people in control of these governments and who did the wrong. But it's the federal government who had the constitutional responsibility to protect Black Americans, and they failed. Not only did they fail, they tortured us. So via legislation that's going to be put forth, the first thing I'm going to do is put forth legislation to help Black Americans reclaim the estimated more than 20 million acres of land that we've lost since the 1950s, but that we also lost prior to the civil rights movement during the era of Reconstruction. Direct monetary payments that was done for Native Americans, that was done for Japanese Americans, to close the wealth gap, but also to compensate us for the physical, physiological, emotional, and mental trauma. A study on Jews showed that the grandchildren of those who survived the Holocaust showed higher levels of anxiety. So if you can inherit trauma from a 14-year tragedy, how much trauma have Black Americans, freedmen, inherited from a tragedy a despicable disgrace that has been going on in this country for more than 400 years. And the Freedmen's Bureau, which was an organization set up by Congress to make sure that Black Americans received food, land, housing, health care, and protection. If it was allowed to do its job, we wouldn't be talking about reparations today because we would already have had it. And we would have had the Freedmen's Bank, which would have been trillions and trillions of dollars into Black America. But Congress failed to do their job. I'm going there to make Congress do their job.
That's awesome.
I don't think
it's great.
It could, your stump speech must be very powerful. I know that it's probably difficult. I can imagine that Mr. Clyburn probably has similar hooks in communities the way that Representative Wasserman Schultz has here in South Florida. But what has been the reception thus far? Obviously, this, like you said, this is a generational, immensely powerful representative of the area who I would imagine a lot of people are afraid to even challenge. But what has been the reception thus far, on the stump, meeting local, potential voters? What has been the overall reception?
People definitely support reparations. You see, what makes South Carolina and Georgia and North Florida, the coastal areas, especially South Carolina, however, we may have been the first state of the Confederacy, but we was also the state that was supposed to be given to all freedmen, Black Americans who are descendants of those who were emancipated, fought for their emancipation via Special Field Order 15. That's where the phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. It comes from here. It comes from us. So from Charleston, South Carolina to 30 miles inland, all the Sea Islands down to North Florida was supposed to be land to Jacksonville, Florida, for Black Americans to settle. That was going to be our property. And that's what one of the first things we said we wanted. The land that we cultivated, and we also said we wanted to be away from white Americans. Can you blame people who the only experiences they had known for white Americans was one of terrorism? I bring that up to say it was short-lived. I still have property in my family from that time, but it's heirs property. Heirs property means it was not bequeathed to anyone via a will. So therefore, anyone who's a descendant of the original owner is an heir, but no one person can own the property. Therefore, you can't get 1 cent out of the property. You can put as much as a mobile home on the property, but you are not getting any equity from it, but you still have to pay the taxes on it. And at any point, you can lose it if someone sells out their share and they're given enough money to give enough to other people. So there's no security. Black Americans were forced to do that because we didn't have any money, obviously. We weren't allowed to learn how to read and write, so we couldn't even read it well. And in many states like North Carolina and Louisiana, they all but made it illegal for Black Americans to get legal representation. But I have property from Special Field Order 15 in the Port Royal experiment where Black Americans were allowed for the first time ever in this country to have their own self-governing town in Mitchellville, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. So my family has property from there as well, heirs property. But people believe that we are due reparations. I have yet to meet anyone who feels we do not. Of course, there are a few. I'm not going to say what I usually call them, okay? But I have a name for them. I'm not one of those safe talking point type people, obviously. There's nothing traditional about my campaign, so no need to act traditional. But I want to say, though, most people believe that we deserve it. They just doubt it's going to happen. But why would they believe it's going to happen? We've had a powerful representative, Mr. James Clyburn, as you mentioned, for 30 years. And yet those same people have seen themselves gotten poorer than they were during Jim Crow. And they have seen our current representative, James Clyburn, write a reparations bill, not for them, us, the Gullah Geechee, the people who are the first source of wealth of the 13 colonies when America was a colony, but for the Catawba Native Americans who used to enslave us and who were called to hunt us down when we would try to escape from the barbaric rice plantations. They've seen him write a bill in 1993, write a bill for the Catawba Native Americans that says to give the Catawba Native Americans special rights, privileges, and protection due to historical wrongs. Excuse me? The Catawba Native Americans? There's only 3,000 of them now. It was even less then. South Carolina has always been one of the blackest states in the United States of America. It was the blackest state for a long time, and even now it's still the 4th to 5th blackest state in the United States of America. We make up almost 2 million of this state's property, and yet he has not once written a reparations bill for us. But guess what he just did? He wrote another reparations bill for Kalagichi, the Black Americans here. Nope. Again, for the Catawba Native American. And it hurts so bad. He wrote a bill for them to get land, something that we have lost 90% of. He wrote a bill and it passed. And now the Catawba Native Americans have extra land, and they're now going to put a multi-million-dollar casino on that land. So when people here tell me, yeah, right, it ain't going to happen, I get upset, but I can't blame them because it hasn't happened with them. But that's why it's my job to defeat him and whomever else I have to challenge to get elected, to show them that it is going to happen. It should have happened a long time ago, but watch me get it done.
I could not agree with you more. And quite honestly, it's disgusting to me. Everything about him is disgusting to me. And I was going to ask you, like, what have been his stance on reparations? But thank you for clearing that up. Yeah, that's embarrassing for him. Like, he should, it's.
Marcel, I can't say enough good about the fact that you have such and again, this is one of the things about politics in general, especially on the left. People are always concerned about stepping in ish, but at the end of the day, you got to have balls and you have to just say it like it is, because people are so desperate and are so tired of being fed a bunch of BS. They need to be told the truth, and they need to hear some hard truths. And you are all about telling hard truths. That is what we desperately need right now. We are going to do whatever we can to help your campaign. What is your website? How can people get involved? We want to do whatever we can to lend a hand.
So my website is marcelforcongress.com. And the biggest thing, and I know this is not going to be a surprise, the thing I need the most is money. Obviously, my incumbent has plenty of that. Remember, his portfolio has gone up to the millions, while his district has become almost the poorest place in which to live in the United States of America. That should be illegal. You should not be able to gain millions and millions of dollars and become such a powerful figure and be so revered and respected, while the people you're supposed to represent are literally living in heartbreaking poverty that I, as a teacher, see every day. You are getting millions while I'm getting snacks from the dollar store, so that my colleagues and I, we can sit home with the students we teach so they have something to eat over the weekend. Or I am having to take my money as a teacher and buy hams for people and bring it to them so they can have something to eat during Thanksgiving break. And even though I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, never have, but it's something that I know is a time where people want to get in and then be festive with their family members. That's supposed to be your job. That's supposed to be you provide resources for your people, and you have not. So I don't have his money, but I don't need his money. As a matter of fact, until I make lives better for my people, I don't even want his money because I have not earned it yet. Because unlike him, I believe I need to earn it. But what I do need, because I have the message, not the money, but the message, I do need y'all's donations, because I do have to get word out there. I still work. I work 60 hours a week. Before I came on here, I woke up a little long ago and I was taking a nap. I work 60 hours a week as a teacher. We do 10-hour days. But after that, I'm going around. I'm calling South Carolinians. I'm speaking with South Carolinians. These are things he has a huge team to do. With a snap of a finger, he can and he will fill the airway with lies about me. He can and he will put little rabbit holes about me to slander my reputation. It's going to be very boring. I'm not even going to pay no attention. But the most thing he's going to do, besides slandering me, is he's going to put out propaganda out there about him to make it seem as if he's been a good representative. He has not. I don't need to go down every rabbit hole with him. I just need to give my constituents facts so they can be what we claim we want all Americans to be, and that's informed voters. They can see we're the sixth poorest out of the entire United States of America, 435 districts, third poorest for children out of 435 districts. Black Americans have less homes and property now than we did during Jim Crow in the era of lynch mobs. They need to see this has happened on his watch while he goes around allowing people to call him the kingmaker and saying that he should be so feared. I need donations so I can continue running commercials about my campaign.
You need to challenge him to a debate. You need to challenge him.
I have.
He'll probably ignore you, but
he has, but I'm not sure if y'all know it. And I need donations for printed materials, and I also need donations to do radio ads. I'm doing all those things. But there's a video of me confronting him at a town hall, and I bring up these same statistics. I call him out. I said, you sold Joe Biden to us. You said Joe knows Joe. We know Joe, and Joe knows us. Since Joe Biden's been in office, he signed 80 executive orders for the LGBTQ, for Asian Americans, for Native Americans, even for people who are not Americans. They are not American citizens. He's done things to make dealing with people who are in the country illegally more humane. Okay, but he said on his commencement speech that the Black American community has always been there. We had always had his back, and he said he was going to have ours. So far, all he's done was shove a longer sword in our backs. Remember, a lot of people held our noses voting for him. I didn't, but a lot of my people did because they felt he was the safe choice. They knew he was the apprentice of a segregationist. They knew about him writing the 1994 bill that Clyburn signed that literally locked up an entire generation of young Black men, but they gave him a chance. And right now, via executive order, Joe Biden can bring back the Freedmen's Bureau to serve as a branch of the government to protect Black Americans who are the descendants of those who were enslaved by the American government. And he will not, and Clyburn does not push him to do so. If my constituents knew that, they will see this man does not have their back, and they will not be fooled by his lies and propaganda. So donations, please.
I got to tell you, Marcel, we will absolutely be donating as part of Generational Change. A number of people in the audience will be doing that as well. I would not hesitate, even for a second, to post pictures of Clyburn's endorsement of a president who has many times in the past wrapped his arms around the most powerful segregationist in the history of our country. A man who represented South Carolina for 60 years. The most vile, disgusting, modern-day colonist, if you will. Because this man who did everything in his power to destroy the Black communities, and he fathered a Black child.
Yes, and may I say something real quick? One, Strom Thurmond, who's notorious, my father, my mother's side, goes back to the mid-1700s, South Carolina. People talk about the filibuster, right? Strom Thurmond has the record of doing the longest filibuster, I don't know, it's for over a day, just to make sure that there was legislation passed to disenfranchise Black Americans. He passed legislation that has literally put people in my family in poverty from which we have never climbed out of. And that's the man that Joe Biden wrote a letter to work with to help keep Black children from going to his children's school. So I get a little sick and tired of people, us who are Democrats, because I'm running as a Democrat. I get a little sick and tired of us making it seem like the only anti-Black people have an R by their name, when we have just as many anti-Black people with a D by their name. Okay, the Dixiecrats came.
You've got people not just with a D next to their name, but you've got people that are Black that are still not that are working against the Black community.
I'm actually talking about. I'm running against one, so I know exactly.
The Congressional Black Caucus is shameful to me.
Not to you. Let me tell you about that. Actually, Yes.
But like when they endorsed Elliot Engel over Jamal Bowman, and I'm like, okay, how is this the Congressional Black Caucus? Like, what in the world is that?
It's not just that. It's
Yeah.
when you have them, they did a survey and they asked Black Americans which policy is most important to you: voting rights, infrastructure, climate change, reparations. Reparation won overwhelmingly by 60% on their website.
Yes.
What have they done? Nothing in regards to reparation. And when you ask them about that, they say, well, we have HR 40. HR 40 is simply a bill that was introduced in the 1980s. The Democrats have had control over the House, the Senate, and the presidency during the 90s, during the Clinton era, and during the Obama era. And they sat there and let HR 40 collect dust. Not only have they let it collect dust, they have not taken any action to make it an actual stronger bill, making it specific to Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved here in America.
I don't think of HR 40 as that's to investigate reparation. They're going to look into that. They need to do a study on that because they haven't quite figured it out yet. That's all that is.
And my thing is this: the studies are there. It's all been done. Even the way to get it paid has been done. They can ask me. I can do it all for them.
I know. It's like
what I'm saying. HR 40 is something that the Congressional Black Caucus uses whenever we confront them about their failure to stand up for Black Americans who are the non-immigrants. We are the native-born Black Americans. They'll say HR 40, but they barely even do that. But right now on their website, they say they are here to stand up for a number of Black Americans that's far lower than our population. And they say Asian Americans, Hispanics. And here's my issue with that. If you come to my restaurant and I have a seafood restaurant, I'm going to feed you seafood. If you come to my restaurant and I say I'm a seafood restaurant and I'm serving you pizza and I'm serving you chicken wings and I'm serving you everything but seafood, that's a problem. The Congressional Black Caucus job is to deal with the Black Americans. When you go to the Hispanic Caucus websites, that's all they talk about are people of Hispanic ethnicity. When you go to Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders commissions, that's all they talk about are the issues of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. The Congressional Black Caucus and Black candidates, because I'm Black here and I'm the one who can definitely say about what is done and not done. Black candidates are the only candidates who act ashamed to actually do something for people who look like them, or in the case of Black Americans, freedmen, people of their own lineage. Every other congressional representative, Tammy Duckworth, and I forgot her first name, but Hirono, the lady senator from Hawaii, when Asian Americans were under attack during those spate of anti-Asian hate crimes, they stood their ground. They said to Joe Biden, all of Congress, not a single piece of legislation will get by us until y'all do something about our people being attacked. When the Hispanic caucus apparently saw that the movie cinemas were not having enough people of Hispanic ethnicity, which, by the way, there's something I can say about that. When the Hispanics say Hispanics, they're not talking about Hispanics look like me. They're talking about Hispanics usually look like Pamela Anderson, because they need to deal with the Hispanic. I'm calling Hispanics out too about their anti-Blackness that happens in their community, because I see the way Afro-Latinos are treated.
We have to. I mean, I hate to. I mean, I'd love to talk to you. I could talk to you for a while, but we have to wrap because we have somebody else coming on.
Marcel, will you come back again? We would love
to. I really want to talk with you about the whole Gullah thing, because when I was in Charleston, I loved that so much, and I'm fascinated by it. And I have palm frond flowers that I got from the ladies at the market, and I thought it was fascinating. So
it's sweetgrass.
It's awesome. We'd love to have you back. We'd love to have you back again.
There is something to be said. You know, a lot of times people run for office, and that takes a lot of courage to begin with. But there is also something to be said when you are somebody who is running for office who has an it factor. You have an it factor. You have an ability to capture people's imagination. And that is a lot of what politics is about, making people believe. You have made us believers. I hope everybody who has been watching tonight
guys, show some love to Marcel.
Friend of the show, Sam from Reset Race is here. She says, so happy to see Marcel on. Yeah. So needless to say, you have two very big supporters here. And we're going to do what we can to help you, because if if there is ever going to be an opportunity to help the communities that so desperately need it, it's going to come by challenging the people in positions of power that could actually do something and are not doing anything.
They're doing nothing.
So they're doing less than nothing. They're actually, as you have said, based on statistics,
they're just helping
have
themselves.
actually made it worse. So guys, marcelforcongress.com. Also, marcelforcongress.com/donate. If you could chip in whatever you can.
Guys, put them on the monthly rotation.
Phone banking, text banking. And if you happen to be in the South, if you have an opportunity to get out to the 6th District and can canvass, knock on doors, obviously, Marcel could definitely use your help. Marcel Dixon, thank you for coming on this evening.
Thank you all for having me. Take care.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful evening.
Y'all too.
Bye-bye.
I knew I'd love him. He was lovely.
And listen, like I said, there is something to be said for the it factor that a candidate has to have, because that to me is immensely important.
He clearly knows his issues.
He does.
Clearly knows what's needed. And the truth is, that's what represents that district. He represents that district. I love that area.
But we are in for a real treat. And thank you, our good friend Kevin Costello, who has been so patient, but I hope he has been at least entertained by the conversation. And yes, Blue, Marcel was freaking fantastic.
Yeah, Marcel was great.
What is even more fantastic is bringing on our good friend Kevin Costello, because if there is anybody who knows every little nook and cranny detail about what is going on with Julian Assange, this is the person that we turn to.
And if you weren't here earlier, we do know that we had said that Joe Sanberg was coming on. He is sick. Kevin was so nice to be able to come on, and it is good timing for this. But so we will have Joe back at another point. He is under the weather. So there was that. I just wanted to disclaim because we had a graphic up. That's why. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, it's good to see you both.
Good to see you. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing all right. And like you said, there was an important development in Julian Assange's case this past week. I treat it as a victory. I don't really temper it, because if it went the other direction, and we'll get into the details, but he now has the door open and can appeal this decision that the U.S. successfully overturned. He can now go to the Supreme Court and say the High Court in the UK was wrong to side with the US government. And without this decision, which we'll get into, it's possible we would have seen the extradition request sent to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, in the UK, which would have been bad because it would have forced the legal team to come up with some way to prevent him from being extradited to the United States.
I think right now there are a lot of people who are not talking about the significance of what this decision actually means. It basically is a decision that effectively the rest of the world is looking at the United States and saying, drop this case already. This is one of those things where the American empire. It's one thing we talk about in politics, how there's a net positive, a neutral, and a net negative to every action and reaction. This is a case where if they pursue this any further, it is only going to be a net negative. Can you talk about where that stands right now based on the judgment that the High Court of the UK came down with?
Yeah, are they still pushing? Like what's going on there on the US side?
Yeah, no. So the Biden administration continues to say that, well, they don't say anything. They continue behind the scenes to push this case against Julian Assange. And we saw an illustration of how depraved it is and how cowardly they are in the report on the first year of Biden's administration that the Committee to Protect Journalists did on his press freedom record. I don't know if you know this, but Leonard Downey has been working on these reports for at least the last 10 years in partnership with the Committee to Protect Journalists. He was a longtime reporter for the Washington Post. They put together this really good report on the Obama administration about his record in his first term that showed a lot of things that were ugly that Democrats weren't confronting. And now we've got this report on the first year. And he said, I went to the Justice Department and I asked them about a whole range of issues. And on only one issue did they basically clam up and not want to answer anything, and that was Assange. And he said, I took notice. I took notice that like I could say, all right, you're doing bad on Freedom of Information Act and getting things to journalists. Journalists are upset. They're not getting enough press conferences. They want to be able to have the officials stop forcing them to get quote approval like 2 and 3 times before they can include something from an official in a news story. Things that are actually important, but pale in comparison to what's happening with Julian Assange and the effect it could have on freedom of the press and freedom of expression around the world as they continue to pursue this case. And you can't get a single official in the Biden administration to speak to this issue. And they'll hide behind this thing of like, well, it's a pending case, so we can't comment on it. But the fact of the matter is that didn't stop people like Secretary of State Antony Blinken from weighing in years ago when it was a possibility that the U.S. government could bring charges. And there are people who have been in the U.S. government who have commented against Julian Assange and have endorsed prosecuting him. And there's a really, really disturbing line that I think has taken hold of Democrats. And we saw it represented by this article that was published at NBC News in the last few weeks by a former, I believe he was in the FBI. His name's Frank Figliuzzi. And he wrote this thing about how it would be good to see Julian Assange brought to the United States. Basically, he rehashed this pipe dream that Democrats have. It would be good to bring Julian Assange to the United States so that the FBI could interrogate him and we could get to the bottom of what was going on with Donald Trump. And then I suppose reopen the Mueller investigation, and there'd be a whole lot of tipping points that this fantasy, this is like a literal fantasy that these former police state people essentially have about what they could do with Julian Assange. And I think it's ridiculous, first off, not only because you don't extradite somebody so you can interrogate them, but you have to actually have crimes. So it's really bizarre because they don't necessarily come out and say that they're for prosecuting Julian Assange. They just seem to be okay with lawfare of using the prosecution in order to get Julian Assange into the U.S. government's clutches. But then beyond that, look at how much Julian Assange has resisted for the last decade. Do you think he's suddenly going to do an about face now and cooperate with the U.S. government and talk to them after every little ugly thing they've done to him? I wouldn't think you would lose dignity if you were cooperating with any prosecutors or FBI agents at this point. So it's just utterly absurd. But this is this thing that they don't have a defense for the prosecution. So you have people who are aligned with the Biden administration who put out these pipe dreams and fantasies in order to get people to justify the Assange prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've always been, advocates for the dropping of this case because there really is no case. And anybody who understands this knows that there's really no case. But what never ceases to amaze me is that it's it's acceptable that he's being held. Why is he being held? Even if you were pursuing these cases, right? These are nonviolent crimes. This is not somebody who is a threat to other people. This is not somebody that should be being incarcerated. And that to me is what really speaks to the nefarious motives that are involved. Because if this were really about the justice aspect of it, really, then there's no reason for him to be incarcerated pending criminal charges. So that to me just speaks to they're just trying to kill him. And this goes back to Hillary Clinton outright saying, why don't we just bomb them? Why don't we just bomb Julian Assange? The fact that somebody who ran for president of this country would speak that way. And it's just so flippant. So to me, when I look at this, they're just trying to kill him and have it look somehow legitimate. And then the United States is also extremely petty and spiteful. And we're about sticking it to people more than doing what's the right thing to do. It's the same way how we deal with Cuba. And it's just I see it all over the place. And that to me is what this Assange case is. It's sort of a pissing match out of spite that they're just saying how long they could go on with this, but it has no basis to it.
And I do want to correct you on one thing, Kevin. It's President Blinken, if we're being honest here. You know, let's call him what he really is, because for all intents and purposes, he is the president of the United States. Sorry, just keeping it real. And I really don't see much of a difference between Blinken and Pompeo. I mean, I just don't. You know, Blinken may be a little bit more diplomatic, but in terms of how they conduct business, especially internationally, they're one of the same in so many ways.
Oh, yeah. Blinken's basically endorsing almost every neocon policy you could imagine. So, you know, I mean, maybe he's not aligning himself with like anti-abortion or Christian fundamentalists throughout the world, but that just may be the only thing you can't put a check in the box next to his name for. But yeah, it's really upsetting that people do not recognize who I would like to wish. I'd like to think they know better, but we do not have any jurisdiction over Julian Assange. We should not. He is an Australian citizen. And I'll just make the fundamental point that I think should be the starting point for any conversation with somebody who's skeptical. If you say free Julian Assange, you say, well, Julian Assange is not an American. He has no ties to the United States. He does not have an obligation to follow its laws. I am a U.S. citizen. I am expected to follow and obey U.S. laws. Julian Assange never worked for a single U.S. agency. He never signed a contract. He never took a secrecy oath. He never agreed to a non-disclosure agreement. He never signed anything that said, I will not publish classified information from the United States. These people who talk about how he's anti-American, about how he has some agenda against the United States because he wants to expose their wars. Well, you know, perhaps we could have political prosecutions in the U.S. in the tradition of, you know, the Red Scare. We could take this country back to the days of the Sedition Acts and everything, if that's what those people who are connected to the FBI and other parts of our intelligence agencies want. But you can't do it against Julian Assange because he's not a U.S. citizen. So you don't have the right to even say that he is supposed to follow the laws of the United States. You can't say he violated the U.S. Espionage Act because the U.S. Espionage Act does not apply to people in countries outside the United States. It's a U.S. Espionage Act. And so I just think that is always missing in the discussion about this, as they're extraditing a person. And it is profoundly disturbing that we are seeing a Justice Department and a wider U.S. government that believes it can apply laws to people. Because it's not just Julian Assange. I mean, I'm just going to say that this seems to be a trend. I'm not here to have this discussion about this case, but there is another political prisoner, Alex Saab, who is a diplomat from Venezuela, and they basically extradited him after they took him from a colony, a sort of client state, and basically the charges are that he violated sanctions as he was trying to make a deal with Iran so they could get food to Venezuela. All right, well, what does he have to do to obey U.S. sanctions? And I think people should be really troubled that the U.S. is trying to enforce its laws against people who are not Americans, because just for the fact that with the news cycle that we have right now, nobody would tolerate Russians enforcing Russian laws against people internationally. Nobody would tolerate China enforcing Chinese laws against people internationally. Nobody would tolerate Iranians trying to, or Saudi Arabia enforcing Saudi Arabia laws against people internationally. So why should the U.S., why is it okay for the U.S. to enforce its law and bring Julian Assange to the United States? It's not.
Well, I think that, and this is obviously, perfect timing, because I am assuming that you saw the highly controversial segment with Brian Stelter the other day, where he went into a classroom with young children trying to tell them what misinformation is. And I'm just thinking,
the irony. You can't make that stuff up.
So bad and so dangerous. And the way that it's being done is if to say, I'm the arbiter of truth. You listen to me. I know everything. And don't you dare listen to anybody else. That is so scary. And the fact that they did it live, they made a live segment. These kids couldn't have been more than maybe, I don't know, 6th grade maybe, if we're being honest. I think that speaks to this idea of just how powerful corporate media still is, because they still drive the narrative regarding Assange. They really do.
Yeah, and allow me to just take a moment to object to the people in our press, mostly these elite, they're supposed to be the most serious people in the room type of pundits, who think that name calling from presidents is like the most biggest capital offense that can be committed.
Grasping for hours
did you hear Jim Acosta says, I still have marks on my back from Donald Trump? He called you names. He didn't even do anything to you.
I totally don't like that Jim Acosta. He's a terrible person, and it's fake news. It's always been fake news. Terrible guy. And let me tell you something. If you were to line up all of the who's who of corporate media, and were to do sort of like a Hollywood Squares type thing, and in terms of who is the most insufferable neoliberal beltway pundit of the journalist class, Jim Acosta probably would be number one. Like, he would be right there. And it's so, they are so cringe. And what I don't think they know, or maybe they do and they just don't care, when the GOP rallies their base, they rally their base against not just the likes of the Nancy Pelosi's and the Debbie Wasserman Schultz's, they rally them against the likes of the Jim Acostas and saying, this is who we're running against. We're running against these guys who Jim was so hurt. It's true. I mean, do you see it that way? Do you see that corporate elitist journalist? I don't even want to call them journalists.
They're not journalists. They're talking heads. They're stenographers.
Would you say that there is some legitimacy to this idea that they are so disliked that they can actually move the needle politically when it comes to how people vote? Would you say that that's fair?
I think that there is a total lack of faith and confidence in these people, and they keep whining and complaining that people don't like them, and they want to drag essentially audiences kicking and screaming to buy into their programs and buy into the segments that they're doing. And if anyone, doesn't like them, they want to immediately put them in these buckets of like I'll just use a phrase that harkens back to the 2016 campaign, which, we all want to like purge from our memories, but that the basket of deplorables, like essentially that like all those people who don't like CNN should just be written off as people who are unjustified in their hatred and loathing. But I have to tell you, just from my experience with this recent hearing that took place, there was, like a comic mishap among journalists when it came to covering this development, this latest decision in the Assange case, because first off, the court service in the UK failed international journalists because they didn't get a link for people to tune in to the video until minutes before the judge was going to enter the courtroom and read the decision or announce it into the record. And then finally, when they opened it, there were errors happening. There was a white screen, or some people said they had a black screen. Whatever it was, they couldn't make it work. And then when they opened it up, they saw the judge and they got like the last 30 seconds and they saw something on screen. And then they ran with it. And so everyone was going with, the high court says they do not grant permission for Julian Assange to appeal to the Supreme Court. And that was the headline that a number of outlets ran with, first of all. But that's actually not what happened. And it actually doesn't matter, because it's basically a formality that the high court says, well, we do not grant permission, but we now, discharge our responsibility, and that frees up Julian Assange to appeal directly to the Supreme Court and ask them to take up the case. And for people who are interested in what happens next, that's where we are right now with Julian Assange. Is their legal team is going to go to the Supreme Court and say, we would like to appeal. And they can only do so, and this is why it's a big media fail. We can only do so because the High Court said, on a point of law, we believe this is of public importance. These goddamn assurances, my words, not theirs, these assurances from the US government about how they would treat Julian Assange, well, the fact that they were offered after the district court ruled against the US government is an important issue for the Supreme Court to decide whether that is fair. I mean, is that fair? Is it fair if the court finds in your favor that a government is wrong, that then they can just come in, swoop in, and make up whatever to get it all go away, so that it's not even an issue anymore? I mean, they can say whatever they want. They don't even really have to prove it. You can't contest it. There's no hearing on it, because that hearing where they were supposed to bring forward those pledges so you could test them already took place. So anyways, yeah, they're not journalists. They are stenographers, and they're not even good stenographers, because they'll put down information that they don't even understand, and then they'll repeat it, and then they'll get caught like The Guardian did, and then they had to change their headline because they had run with a headline that didn't make any sense.
I think we have a really big problem in this country. Well,
we have a lot of them.
We have one of the biggest reasons. There's many reasons why Trump won and will likely win again if he runs. Is we also have a huge problem with celebrity worship in this country. That is the idea that people look at somebody like Jim Acosta as a celebrity, and let's be honest, it's a two-way street, because he embraces that. He wants to be famous. He wants to have all of the perks that comes with being a big shot. And that is something that you see with a lot of them. He just happens to be, out of all the ones that are guilty of that type of behavior, he may be the most guilty. And so right now, I think it's a matter of, what is going to be the end result of this, because they're not going to do anything to hasten this process in terms of allowing Assange to go free. They may not fight it, but they're certainly going to leave it to, whatever is going to be the most drawn out process at this point. Yeah. How do you see this ending as of right now? No, it's not really, this has been a completely unpredictable odyssey for several years, but we may be seeing light at the end of the tunnel. How do you see it concluding?
Well, so my belief has always been that they don't know how to publicly defend extraditing Julian Assange to the United States. And with all the press freedom groups that are opposed, with all the human rights organizations that are opposed, the only thing they really have going for in their favor is that there is total complicity within Congress. You can count on 2 or 3 of your fingers the number of people in both the House and Senate that have ever said anything that's not really fair. It's more than one hand. Bernie Sanders made a pretty clear statement. Senator Ron Wyden actually made a strong statement against Julian Assange being extradited, and I give him credit. He was good on the NSA when Edward Snowden, you've had him speak out. He's retired now, but Justin Amash did actually say he opposed it. And Ilhan Omar, I think, has taken an interest. I think she can be pushed, but for right now, she's just got meaningless concerns about the case. AOC does. So
I wouldn't bother.
So I think it's a waste, but if
I can ever get Ilhan to come on the show, then I will actually.
I think Rashida Tlaib has also expressed specific dissent against the. And we've had the and there are like a half dozen or so people who have done the The dance.
Well, no. So there's a really backhanded way of opposing this that I find disgusting.
Oh, saying that he's a terrible person, but he's a blah blah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. In Australia, there was a parliament. There's a few parliamentarians that have come around, and they'll say like, they'll say things like, I find Julian Assange to be a monster, but he's our monster, and we need to take care of him. And so like, I don't know really what to do with that, but I guess I do have to put you down as opposing this on principle. But it's really just nasty that you have to say those things about Julian Assange because they're not based in any kind of reality.
But that to me is a lot more courageous than not saying anything at all. Because I understand that there is, listen, you're basically going against the corporate special interest narrative. It's really no different than what we have seen recently. And look, we know that what Steve Donziger did was monumental and heroic. And the fact that he was not only prosecuted for something that he should have never been prosecuted for, and they have already come out and said it was illegal to prosecute him in the first place. But that's not enough. Joe Biden just put the prosecuting judge or it was somebody who was aiding the prosecution now she's a federal judge.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't just want to stab you in the back. We want to stab you in the heart at the same time.
Yeah. So where I see this going is, it's my belief that this punishment by process, which is what it is, will continue to unfold. But I don't think that they are willing to defend it. And so there is a huge likelihood that it could get to the desk of the Home Secretary, who is supposed to authorize the extradition. And they could balk. They could decide that they don't want Julian Assange to get on a plane and be brought to the United States. And they might just abandon. But they know that right now, as far as the process goes, if they continue to win, it's going to be about 1.5 to 2 years before he gets to that point, before he is waiting to find out if the secretary is going to put her stamp of approval on a document so that he can be loaded on a plane and brought to the United States. Because I can quickly just go through this. The Supreme Court has to decide this question. Well, that's going to take several months this year. If they rule against Julian Assange, then the extradition request can be sent to her office in order to be approved. But they haven't appealed the core press freedom issues, which were ruled against by the district court back on January 4th, 2021, which is when they lost, the U.S. government lost on the mental health grounds because she ruled that it would be oppressive to extradite him to the U.S. But the judge didn't actually say that, hey, he's a journalist and he has press freedom. So they want to appeal that at some point, and they would have to in order to stop him from being brought to the United States. So then you have an appeals court hearing. Well, last year, that was most of the year, that appeal. So wind that up. Then the High Court of Justice is hostile. I think it's fair to say the High Court of Justice is hostile. I don't know if you know this, but I don't know if you're aware, but one of the justices, the Chief Justice actually of the High Court, is a friend of a former foreign minister named Sir Alan Duncan. So this guy's name is Chief Justice Ian Burnett. This was done by a really fantastic outlet in the UK called Declassified UK. And this former foreign minister called Assange a miserable little worm when he was in Parliament. And then he was a minister and he was part of this operation. I think it was called Operation Pelican. It was this pressure campaign to get Julian Assange out of the embassy. He's a 40-year close friend. He went to college, he went to Oxford with Chief Justice Ian Burnett, who is running this court. And Burnett did not recuse himself, clearly identifies with this person, and was involved in making this decision. And so the the High Court of Justice is hostile, so they're going to rule against him, and then it would go to the Supreme Court. But first, they have to do this thing that I don't understand as an American, where you have to ask the court that just ruled against you permission to appeal to the higher court. We don't even do that here in the U.S. That is absurd. When you lose in a district court, you don't have to ask the district court for permission to appeal it. You just go file your appeal, and then they'll tell you if they're going to take your appeal or not. So they have this extra step in the UK. And once the Supreme Court is done, if he fails there, then, okay, 2 more years of Julian Assange's life has ticked off, and now it goes to his desk. Joe Biden is facing re-election. Do they want Julian Assange being brought to the United States during a re-election year? I guess you could see it working. You could see it not working. Maybe it's a mass distraction they don't want to deal with. So now they say, Julian Assange, we'll let you go because, I mean, I imagine at that point, how many strokes will he have had by 2024? I mean, what other ailments will he have? We heard about this stuff during the main extradition hearing. He suffers from osteoporosis. He has a deteriorating mental state. He's on a number of medications. He's someone who has been diagnosed with Asperger's. There are just all kinds of different things going on with him personally that I imagine are just continuing to compound while he's kept in Belmarsh. So maybe having driven Julian Assange insane, Joe Biden's administration is willing to just let him go because they don't want the spectacle of trying to prosecute him under the Espionage Act in a manner that is opposed by most of the civil society organizations. And, whether or not he's actually a stable person because they've driven him mad when he comes here and is put on trial. I mean, I don't know if maybe they don't want that, or maybe they don't care. I don't know. It's, there's a part of me that also thinks that they don't see him as a human being. So they'll be fine if he's completely mad and put him on trial and let him, and maybe being totally unhinged they'll feel vindicated in putting him on trial under the Espionage Act. But I do actually believe that they don't have the guts to defend this and that they would be willing to make a phone call at the last minute. And we've seen this happen before. Because in Yemen, under Obama, there was a journalist that Jeremy Scahill frequently defended from Yemen who was kept in a prison in Yemen. His name was Abdullah Haider Shaya, and he had done some investigating. I believe he had gone to some sites and investigated drone attacks. He was thrown in a prison. The U.S. was keeping him in a prison. And then at a certain point, it became unpopular and hard for them to defend. So they had to allow him to leave prison. So we've seen this happen with political prisoners before, that Democrats just give up and no longer are willing to fight. And so that's actually what I favor. But I actually find that to be worse than backing and supporting bringing him to the U.S. to put him on trial, because I think, while it is very monstrous what Mike Pompeo did, he's very open about it, and I can oppose it. When Mike Pompeo comes forward and says that he doesn't think Julian Assange deserves First Amendment rights, when he says that Julian Assange is working for the Russians, and he says all these things, I get to contest that. I get to challenge it. But the silence on the Biden administration means that we do not have anything to engage with, and they get to continue to do this without any noticeable opposition in the United States. And that, to me, is probably the most troubling thing about where we are right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. First of all, you hit it very, very correctly in the beginning. I was going to say, did you go to law school?
No.
Okay. So the first thing is that there has to be jurisdiction of a case, right? Like a court has to actually have jurisdiction. And so when you talk about, how is he subject to the espionage laws that apply to United States citizens? But yet, so he's being subjected to the Espionage Act, but he doesn't get First Amendment protection because he's not a citizen. The irony of that, like, and that just from a legal perspective, it's just wrong in so many ways. Like, it's a bad case. It's clearly punishment by process. And it's just obvious at this point that that's what they're doing. And it's just people, it's unacceptable. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's an outrage. Really.
I mean, they don't have a case. It's made up by the CIA. It's something that Mike Pompeo walked out with in his first speech when he called WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence agency. And look, WikiLeaks has been proud to call itself an intelligence agency of the people. And they were pretty noteworthy for being a stateless news organization. And it's worth just saying a few good things about WikiLeaks as we close here, because they were pioneers, but they were also recognizing that this is not often put in this manner, but it's important. And as I go through and I look over some older materials, because I'm actually working on a book on this. So as I go through and I look through the past and connect it to this case, they recognized that there are sets of documents that are so much of a political hot potato that you need to find some way to insulate yourself, so that, and what they were trying to do but did not succeed in doing, is find a way that they could set up so that the US would not be able to stop them from having the effect of sharing their information. And in fact, the US did not stop them from sharing the information that they obtained. They just managed to get Julian Assange, the person, the editor-in-chief of that organization, and neutralize him for the last decade to a degree, because he sought political asylum in Ecuador from really dodgy sexual allegations brought forward in Sweden. And then they went forward with the Espionage Act case after that. But the whole point of WikiLeaks was to be this kind of clearinghouse for publishing documents that are too legally risky for media organizations to publish themselves. Too risky for the New York Times, too risky for the Post, too risky for the Guardian, because in the Guardian, you can get sent a D notice and then they can come there and make a big ceremony about destroying your hard drive because it had Snowden files on it like a week or two ago, which was one of the more bizarre rituals I saw played out. But you may not remember that, but there's somebody who actually came there and beat the crap out of a hard drive in like their parking garage just to make a show of the fact that it was wrong for them to publish Snowden documents in their newspaper. So they were trying to give journalists a space, give sources, give whistleblowers a space that they could go, because it is true that there are some countries, in the continents of Africa and Asia, and there are places where it is dangerous to expose corruption in government. There are whistleblowers who get murdered in South Africa, and WikiLeaks was supposed to be a place that anyone around the world, the first leaks that they published that were noteworthy came from Kenya. And now what the US has done is taken out and destroyed the credibility and neutralized a site that was set up to be for the benefit of people around the world. And that's something that people need to recognize going forward.
The one thing that we always make sure of when we do this show is that we are speaking truth to power, regardless of what the circumstance may be. Jen was a journalist. Journalism was part of my studies in college. There is no question that this is a dying industry, and the people who think that they are doing journalism are the ones that are actually destroying it. I wonder if they know that. I think one of the biggest problems, and this all ties back to the 96 Telecom Act, the Clintons, more than anybody in the last 40 years, their policies in the Clinton administration destroyed this country. NAFTA, normal trade relations with China, the crime bill, repeal of Glass-Steagall, and the 96 Telecom Act. The reason journalism is dead today is because of that legislation. It's not just because of the fact we had 55 media companies in the country in 1996, and today we have 5. That is not a mistake. but that is also related to why we have this lack of transparency when it comes to this type of news. You know, Watergate happened because writers at the Washington Post exposed that. There is none of that
Oh God,
that would
no.
ever happen at
Yeah.
the Washington Post under Jeff Bezos' watch today.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
everybody knows that. So what you do is immensely important. Where can
Yeah.
people find your work? And as you said, you're working on a book right now. So whatever we could do to plug away, my
Yeah.
friend, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the book's going to take a year because that's just how publishing is. But so I won't plug it yet, but stay tuned. But I will be updating people who are, you know, subscribers and supporters of my Dissenter newsletter on how things are going with the book. So if you go, this is a project of Shadowproof. If you go to the dissenter.org, that's where I send out the updates on Julian Assange and this war on WikiLeaks that we've been talking about on the show today, as well as cover other whistleblower stories. And thank you for having me on. It's always good to talk to both of you.
Yeah, no, I love it when you come on. I feel like you're like our Assange expert, but also just in general, we like to have actual journalists. I know it's fascinating.
Oh, and
come on and talk about topics. I was just saying to Peter, I really want to get into what's going on in Ukraine, and we need to have somebody on who really understands that, because that's not something that I want to just be like saying, you know, well, this is what I saw on CNN. So I need somebody who really knows, but I appreciate you very much as one of those resources.
Well, thanks. Just let me throw out quickly that we're starting the 9th year of unauthorized disclosure, which I do with Rania Kalik, and we've had you on. And so we'll start publishing episodes
Unauthorized
in 2022.
Disclosure. Wait,
Yeah.
that's on what? Because what's Shadowproof?
So this is my media organization that I have for publishing my stuff on whistleblowers. I also have a colleague who does a lot of work running this fellowship that runs stories on prisons. So he comes from a background of covering mass incarceration and policing and stuff like that. So that's what we do at Shadowproof. Is there's this like synergy that we've found between the government cracking down whistleblowers and then covering the fact that there's all these governments that are trying to jail and punish people with police forces.
Right. No, it's a good connect. I mean, it's a good link.
Kevin, great as always,
Thanks,
and thanks for
Kevin.
coming in the pinch, in the clutch, as I like to say in sports terminology.
Thank you.
But excellent reporting as always. Appreciate all the info. We'll be talking to you soon, my friend.
Thanks.
All right, I guess you could say I nailed the squib kick where
Is that?
Dude, I got to tell you
For
something.
God's sake! You had to go into his sports
but
games.
you know what? As
You
a sports
had to
fan,
go into sports games.
look, you could say all you want about Mahomes and what a great quarterback he is, and he
for
is. But
God's
the
sake.
fact that I feel so bad, because I have a number of friends who are Buffalo fans. The fact that they didn't squib kick in that spot, I will never understand
God's
what
sake,
the hell
you
they were
had
thinking
to
in that
open
moment.
up that door.
But-
you had to do it.
Well, could be
best
worse.
football weekend ever, but I'm with you. You got a squib
Yeah.
kick.
Oh, it would have been the perfect football weekend if Buffalo had held on, but a different story
I
for a
didn't
different
watch, but
day.
I do have like sort of a special place in my heart for the Bills. They were always my least hated team in my division growing up. So.
Well, I think most people would agree with that. The Jets suck and the Pats suck. so there you go.
All my hatred is reserved for the Patriots. I have no hatred left over for any other team because it's all focused on the Patriots. And so every other team is fine for me.
Disgruntled Dolphins fan. I'm just hoping that my
It was a snowplow incident.
I'm just hoping that my Giants. Yes, I will never forget that game. I'm just hoping that my Giants do well in the draft. That's all I can say.
Good God.
All right.
Kevin,
Well, good luck to your Giants. We'll see you both later.
Bye,
Sounds
Kevin.
good, brother. Have a good one. Bye-bye. So we've got a new subscriber, Sophia. Great to
Hi,
have you
Sophia.
here. Hope you're enjoying the content.
We cover Assange fairly regular. I mean, it's on our rotation of things that we cover.
Well, we understand the
and
importance,
focus.
Of me.
Yeah.
There's no question that it is.
That was one of the first things we did when we had a platform was
Yeah.
have a thing, have a telethon about a videoathon,
Matt-
a live stream.
Matt,
about
we
Assange.
agree with you. We absolutely would like to be a part
Oh,
of
yeah.
A progressive network.
What
We've
I
been
would
talking
love-
about it.
I would love, actually, what I would really love is for like how Kevin was just saying he does a show with Rania. Rania is also an amazing journalist. Rania Khalek, love to have her on. But I would love for there to be like a Jordan would be like a group of actual real journalists that have like a network. And I would like for us to be their sort of like comic, one of the shows that's sort of like more of a comic aspect of it, because we don't promote to be journalists, but like, you know, a variety show, if you will, like part of with real network journalists that are real experts on things, so that we would have like a real, I mean,
and dirtbag leftist. I got to tell you, you could make the argument that it is the curse. It is the curse of OJ. That's why the Bills haven't won, is because of the curse of OJ.
Oh, for God's sake, that is not why. All right, I'm ready on this, because some of this stuff I cannot.
We're running late tonight, but let's
get rid of our banner.
Let's finish with a bang. So we are going to talk about. Well, we always go left to right.
You always go left to right,
but I think that well, yeah, because we definitely have to close with Dinklage, no question.
Oh, I have words about
500 that. Acres of California forest land returned to indigenous tribes. Jen?
Yeah, indigenous.
Indigenous. Did I say indigenous?
I don't even know what you said, but it's
indigenous. I said
indigenous.
A messed up word that isn't real. I just made up a word.
Okay, so this is really cool. And granted, it's a small thing. It's a trifle. I know that, but I like, to at least try to have something positive. But the property is now owned. This is 500 acres of redwood forest land that this tribe was forcibly removed from centuries ago. This tribe that in its current I guess, who's in charge of it is actually can trace back to the original stewards of this land, which is really amazing. And the name, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, it has now been translated to Fish Run Place. And that's in our language. I'm not going to try to say what it is in Sinkyone language. But so this is a habitat corridor critical to many endangered species and home to towering old tree redwood. I mean, this is the redwoods. This is part of the redwoods in California.
Northern California.
And so this is the second time that the Save the Redwood League has entered into a conservation agreement with them. So in 2012, they had donated as well. So this is just something I'm pleased to see land going in the correct direction.
Protecting the environment, believe it or not, is not a pastime in California in a lot of places.
No, this is a step in the right direction.
The irony of this particular part of California, this is one of the most conservative parts of California. This is up at the top. And so what we always like to highlight is that there's a big difference between the elected members of the GOP and the real rural conservatives of this country who value our environment, who do a great job of protecting this land.
Yeah. Including people like, hunters and Second Amendment enthusiasts.
The people that have the signs, "Don't tread on me," on the entrance to where they live.
People that a lot of Democrats would never want to talk to.
But they do more to help the environment because they actually live it. They actually do it.
Right. It's true. So anyway, next.
Biden is defending key Trump immigration policies in court.
And I have
shocking.
It's not at all. So
the Justice Department is fighting to maintain Trump's border restrictions and against compensation for separated families.
Okay.
Now,
so I can kind of like consolidate it, but basically although the Biden administration is no longer separating families, okay, and they have reunited 62 of 5,000 people or that were originally separated, 62 of the kids that the Biden administration, I guess, had, put back together with their families, but they have also dropped the compensation that was being sought by these families that were separated from their children, pain and suffering compensation. And the Biden administration is just sort of dropping that, which to me is condoning it. And in fact, what they have switched their song to while he was campaigning, he was all, "Oh, this policy, it's so horrible. It's so horrible." But yet now what they're claiming, Biden administration, is that, it was legal at the time they were doing it, so we don't need to compensate the families.
Like I said,
it's quite a switch there.
It's really no different than Biden, nominating Jennifer Reardon to a federal judge position after what she did to Stephen Donziger. No surprise there. Remember, guys, the wake-up call is not Trump. The wake-up call is Biden.
Yeah. So the point is, guys, this is a real problem with Joe. Okay. Okay, he has stopped separating families, but he is still like mass deporting.
And I still maintain that it's President Blinken, not President Biden, but that's just me.
But the other key aspect of this is that they're using the emergency declaration about COVID to keep maintaining these certain border policies, even though the CDC and Dr. Fauci and people have said that there's no correlation between the actions that they're taking at the border, has no logical connection to stopping the spread of COVID. So it can be done. That is just an excuse that, again, we see an overextension of one branch of government going into this sort of, oh, it was during the COVID emergency, and extending that beyond it needing to be extended.
Hey, look, I would have much stricter border policies if we actually had less of a imperialist approach to countries around the world and their citizenry that are desperately trying to come here because of what we did to them. You know, again, a lot of times people only see what they want to see, not what they need to see.
So it's still going on, people. We just don't get it. It doesn't get covered as much.
And so with that said, if you think that immigration is bad, our economy is 10 times worse.
Yeah, we're in a bad way, people.
Rents rose 5 times faster in 2021 than in 2020. That is unbelievable, considering that our infrastructure bill is a joke. It's a corporate giveaway. It's really not about revitalizing property. And think about this. Think about how many abandoned properties we have, how many properties are available that can be utilized much more effectively rather than dealing with this rent crunch. Because let's face it, you got a lot of people out there who just want to make a big buck, and they know that they can take advantage of people because housing is supposedly short right now.
So rents are continuing to rise across the United States. The cost of rent on average was 10.1% higher in 21 than 20, growing 5 times faster last year than it did in the first year of the pandemic. Okay. Yeah. By December, national rents had the 6th straight month of double-digit annual increases. The national median rent for a 1-bedroom in December was $1,651, up 19.3% over the year before. But many large cities saw rents surge even higher, led by Miami.
Because
Florida, led by Miami, with median rent of $2,850 in December, up a whopping 49.8% from last year.
God, when is
Miami was followed by Tampa and Orlando, which both had annual rent growth of 34%.
I'm telling you, they're just going to sauce off into the Atlantic Ocean. That's what's going to happen.
So this is actually, it's a CNN business story. It's national. It just happens to be that Miami is the number one. And we say it all the time. We have a serious problem here.
We do.
And it's really bad. So anyway.
But unfortunately,
it's not.
You know, as Billy Corbin, friend of the show, would say, Democrats never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Because if I was running for high office right now, and I'm not, I am thinking of what would be my platform and what I would do as a populist running for office. I would be running on the fact that people can't afford to live anywhere.
I'm going to put a picture of you on a moose.
Bull moose?
Yeah.
I like it.
You should have a picture of you on a moose.
Yeah, we really do suffer here. And we are the 3rd most populous state in the country. God, we really are Florida.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And last but not least,
I have a lot to say about this. So.
Peter Dinklage pushes back on Disney remake of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Thank you. The former Game of Thrones star said that despite progressive casting, the coming live-action remake still tells a backward story.
Okay, so I have to preface this with my bias, because not that I'm a journalist, but I will give you my bias, is that I have a thing for Peter Dinklage. I have liked him since he was on Nip Tuck. I find him to be an incredibly sexy person. His confidence is oozing, and I just find him to be an incredible actor. So I'm going to preface this with I have a Peter Dinklage bias.
It's that goatee.
No, because he didn't even have facial hair when he was in Nip Tuck, and there is something about him. So the point of this is, and this is what is just so pathetic about it, that he has to point this out, that they don't see this. So our virtue signaling over woke culture decided that we're going to put a Latina in the lead role of Snow White. All for it. Apparently it's the same girl from West Side Story, whatever. Yay for her. I couldn't care less.
Her name is Snow White.
Yeah. So in this case, it would be like Snow Blanca. But anyway, so whatever. So that's great. But he's pointing out the obvious, which is you're still making a movie that is about 7 dwarves living in a cave, which is ludicrous. And I started to think about this more, and it made me more and more angry. You would never make a movie called like Snow White and the 7 Cripples, or Snow White and the 7, any sort of language you would use to describe a group of people based on a hereditary or genetic trait. And I find it really upsetting. And this is not over woke. This is really upsetting to me. This is sort of like teams that use ethnicities as mascots. It's the same kind of thing. It's just gross, and just don't do it. So I thought about it long and hard, and I have a solution for Disney. This is something that I really think. It needs to be like the 7 miners. And you can have it be where, because they were gem miners. That was the point, is that they were miners. And I don't mind things like mascots when it's occupations. So she could be living with just a group of 7 men that are very, very unkempt and messy and, you know, whatever. They could do a really modern take on it and just sort of have them be somewhat like, you know, anti-toxic masculinity and whatever they want to do. But it can't be dwarfs anymore. It just can't. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. Like when I think about Peter Dinklage, I don't think, oh, he's a dwarf. I don't even think that. I think he is a person and he happens to have dwarfism, but like that is not who he is. And I find it really annoying just to use that term, or make them fictional creatures. Have it be different woodland creatures, like, you know, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and have there be like a bear and a deer and whatever Disney sidekick.
You're asking people to be creative.
No, I'm just saying that dwarfs is not a group of people that you would categorize as living in a cave. And it bothers me now. So anyway, and again, I did preface this with, I do have a Peter Dinklage bias.
Dinklage.
I do really like him. So anyway, that's my soapbox rant about the dwarfs.
One line I do like from Tim Pool is get woke, go broke. And for a lot of people, they get woke and they do go broke. And yet another example of how there are no ideas anymore. Everything is just a remake. And, you know, I'm sure we could come up with something if we tried.
And I don't mind the story. And actually, Peter Dinklage had even said that he wouldn't even be opposed to some sort of, you know, progressive remake or modern remake. And I agree. It's like, that's just not a thing anymore. It's just not a thing.
It's kind of like
have them be fairies.
It's like making the fairy. It's like making the fairy godmother a gay man. It's like
it's too gratuitous. But that's how I feel about having a Latina play Snow White. That's fine. I wouldn't care if they changed the name and it wasn't called Snow White and they used the same storyline and it could be a person of any race. I don't really care. That's not the point. Point is, please stop mocking people based on genetic traits and creating a group of people out of like, they're not characters.
And Paul, let's face it, Walt Disney was a Nazi.
It's slightly anti-Semitic.
It's just a little bit of a problem. Just a little bit of a problem there.
But
maybe not at the level of Henry Ford, but still pretty bad. But nevertheless, it's been quite an entertaining show this evening.
And by the way, Peter Dinklage, if you ever see this, I really do so I'd love to talk. Just saying.
Maybe we'll make it happen.
I don't know, but it was the Nip Tuck episodes.
Monday. What do we have coming up?
Oh, what do we have? Well, you told me that our candidate has to. I hate when you do that. It's so gross. I don't care that it's itchy. It's gross. For people who don't know, he's scratching the tops of his fingers on the side of the desk, on the corner of the desk. I don't care. It's like skin flakes. It's just gross. You wouldn't. It's just. Why not just clip your toenails? Oh, you have to take off your shoes. You're like Frank Costanza.
I would not do something like that.
He doesn't take off his shoes.
Stop short.
You're Costanza. Okay, so we're talking with Colonel Rob Maness, but I'm not sure who that is. So tell me about that.
He is a 32-year Air Force veteran. He is.
I figured there was a veteran aspect.
Yes, he's in. Yeah, well, he's a colonel. He's in the conservative movement, but he's definitely more reasonable and seems to be.
We're going to try to have a reasonable discussion.
Yes, very reasonable discussion, and hopefully one about the military. Which we need to have because we have conversations with guys like Danny Scherzen and Oliver Stone and, people who are definitely on the left side politically. But let's see if we might find some ground on the right side. I think that is important. And, especially with what's happening, this might be an opportunity to have a conversation about what's going on in the Ukraine. So
we need to bring on an expert on this.
Hey, he might be. You never know.
Well, okay, fine, but I prefer like a journalist person. And we were supposed to be having.
If we will have Annette Taddeo, who's running for the governorship of
But
Florida.
we may not.
No, she's not coming on Monday, but we are rescheduling. So
Okay.
that will be
So
done.
we'll have somebody. We'll have a candidate.
And possibly Joe Sanberg might come on next Wednesday. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. So some things are still up in the air. And we were planning for February. This is the key thing that I wanted to kind of. You want to talk about that? That's what we're planning.
Yeah, for February 7th, I believe.
Who's Mark Judson? Which candidate is that? That's for February 2nd.
Yes, he's running for Congress in North Carolina, I want to say.
Okay, well, that's good because I wonder if you could even get Erica to come on that same night and we could do it in North Carolina because theirs is first.
Yeah, maybe.
Their election's first. Okay, anyway. So we're trying to put together a panel for February 7th of candidates that are running in, like, do a Texas group of Texas primary candidates. So Jasmine Crockett, Donna Imam, and hopefully we can get Jessica Cisneros to come on. And who else was there? Someone else? We're gonna start doing like groups as and I'm trying to go in order of the state elections. So Texas is relatively soon. North Carolina is actually first. So I didn't know we had somebody else from North Carolina besides Erica. So I would have. Okay, so we should definitely.
I think we can get a group on.
That would be a Groupon.
No, a group. Yeah. Okay. Good job. Nice play on words. But with that said,
yeah, guys, don't forget, Joe's looking for help in the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Let's virtue signal our way to a Supreme Court nominee.
To be there with Amy Coney Island. And you know what? Here's the thing. While I did like Ruth, I was not happy that she didn't retire during Obama's second term. I think she should have retired. But I remember. I've said the story before, people. I remember when Sandra Day O'Connor got appointed to the Supreme Court. I remember feeling so excited that a woman was appointed to the Supreme Court. My mom and I were like, it was like one of the coolest things ever. And then she was her. So like, just because somebody seems to represent based on appearance a certain group of people does not mean they're going to really represent that group of people. So, we have a Black woman as the vice president right now. I'm just saying.
I'm more concerned about how one governs, just as Marcel Dixon has been saying. It really doesn't make a damn.
Oh, I really wish
if you just want to have people for those purposes.
It's true.
It matters who. It doesn't matter who. It matters what.
Right, and that goes for Pete, but he's gay Buttigieg. It goes for anybody who is any sort of virtue signal stereotype, but yet they are on the wrong side of.
And I like to think that because they are
they're
so deliberate with their virtue signaling now, that I think when that starts to happen, that's when people start to say, all right, I think what you're doing is trying to avoid actually governing properly. So that's where we're at.
Right, you're going to throw a token gesture. I'll appoint a Black woman to the Supreme Court, but I'm not going to forgive your student loans, even though Black women disproportionately suffer from student loan debt than any other group. So it's just mind-blowing, Joe, that you could erase student debt with an executive order.
This like Joe even knows what the hell's going on.
That's true. But it's like, I'm going to appoint a Black woman to the Supreme Court. You know what they would rather have, Joe? Forgive their student loans, because Black women are so disproportionately affected by student loan debt. So I'm just saying, it's infuriating.
The era of nothing getting done for the people is going to end very, very soon. And that is why we will close with, we love Nina Turner, and we are 100.
We love you, Nina.
And we are 100% supporting her run for Congress. Definitely one of the top candidates, if not the top candidate running. We've got to get her in.
And while I will go back to Cleveland, I will never do it on Spirit Airlines.
Neither would I.
Never. I'll change planes before I'll do that.
Good night, guys.